In the opulent haze of 1815 London, where the scent of victory over Napoleon mingled with the rot of old scandals, a desperate young woman dared to step into a world that could devour her whole. Her mission was simple: vanish into the crowd, observe, and escape before her fragile secrets unraveled. But in a realm ruled by whispers and watchful eyes, one fateful stumble could ignite a firestorm. As she fled the ballroom's suffocating splendor, her path crossed not with obscurity, but with the iron grip of the most untouchable man in England, the Duke they called the Frost Lord. And in that instant, the invisible girl became the center of a scandal that would rewrite her destiny. The ballroom of Eldridge House shimmered like a fever dream, gas lamps flickering from crystal chandeliers that rained light onto swirling silks and polished boots. The air was thick with perfume, laughter, and the undercurrent of ambition, a marriage market disguised as merriment. For most debutantes, this was paradise, a chance to snare a title with a flutter of lashes or a coy smile. For Miss Alara Voss, it was a battlefield where one wrong move meant annihilation. She lingered near a towering potted palm, her sage-green muslin gown, a hand-me-down from her employer's cast-offs, blending seamlessly with the foliage. At 21, Alara's features were striking: porcelain skin framed by chestnut curls pinned in a simple chignon, hazel eyes sharp with quiet intelligence. But she wielded invisibility like a shield. Her role as companion to her cousin, Lady Beatrice Harrington, demanded it. The Harringtons paid handsomely for Alara's discretion, enough to keep her widowed mother and ailing brother from the workhouse. In return, she shadowed Beatrice, steering her from folly while remaining unseen. Tonight, Beatrice flirted dangerously with Captain Lyle, a charming rogue with empty pockets. Alara watched from afar, her heart pounding. If Beatrice compromised herself, the blame would fall on her companion. She needed to intervene. Weaving through the throng, Alara dodged elbows and trailing hems. The string quartet swelled into a lively gavotte, dancers parting like waves. She was almost there, close enough to whisper a warning, when Lady Arabella Thorne stepped backward, her voluminous emerald skirt sweeping like a scythe. Alara collided with something solid, unyielding. A gasp escaped her as she stumbled, arms flailing for balance. Strong hands caught her elbows, steadying her with a grip like forged steel. Her eyes lifted, locking onto a face carved from winter marble, high cheekbones, a jaw set like granite, eyes the color of Arctic ice, piercing, emotionless. Lucian Hale, Duke of Winterfell. The Frost Lord. Society's most eligible and impenetrable bachelor, whispered to have a heart as cold as his northern estates. He never danced, rarely spoke, and touched no one. Until now. The ballroom's hum faltered, eyes turning like compass needles to the spectacle. Alara's blood ran cold. "Your Grace," she stammered, pulling back. "Forgive me, I was careless." His grip lingered a heartbeat too long, his gaze assessing her like a puzzle. "Evidently," he said, voice low and resonant, like distant thunder. "No anger, no warmth, just fact." Lady Arabella spun, her fan snapping shut. "Clumsy girl. Watch your step." But her eyes darted to the Duke, fury flickering at the unintended intimacy. Alara curtsied hastily, heat flooding her cheeks. "My apologies." She turned to flee, but the Duke's voice halted her. "Wait." The single word commanded the room. Whispers erupted. "Who is she?" The Duke, touching a nobody. Alara froze, trapped in the eye of a storm she had never meant to summon. The Harrington townhouse on Grosvenor Square was quiet at last, the clock striking 3 as Alara slipped into her narrow attic chamber. Moonlight filtered through the single dormer window, silvering the threadbare counterpane and the small stack of letters tied with faded ribbon, her mother's last pleas for funds to pay the apothecary. Alara pressed her fingertips to her temples, willing the ache behind her eyes to subside. She had survived the evening. Barely. Yet sleep refused her. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the iron strength of the Duke of Winterfell's hands steadying her elbows, saw those glacial eyes cataloguing her as though she were an equation to be solved. Men of his station did not look twice at paid companions. They certainly did not stare across crowded ballrooms. By morning, the incident had already begun its transformation into gossip. The Harrington breakfast room buzzed with it. "You are the talk of the ton, Elara," Beatrice announced, waving a note sealed in rose wax. "Lady Cooper herself writes that Winterfell has never before touched a woman in public. Never. And he held you long enough for half the room to notice." Lady Harrington, Beatrice's mother, lowered her chocolate cup with a frown. "It was an accident, Beatrice. Do not embellish." The girl merely stumbled. But her tone carried warning. Accidents that drew the attention of dukes were rarely forgiven in households that employed companions. Elara kept her gaze on her plate. "It will be forgotten by week's end, my lady." Yet even as she spoke, a footman entered with a silver salver. Upon it rested a single card. Heavy cream stock. Black border. A simple crest, a wolf rampant beneath a crown of frost-kissed stars. The Duke of Winterfell. The room stilled. Lady Harrington's brows rose so high they threatened her lace cap. Beatrice squealed. Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. "It must be a mistake," she whispered. The footman cleared his throat. "Addressed to Miss Elara Voss, madam. The gentleman's man awaits a reply." Lady Harrington recovered first. "Open it, girl." With fingers that trembled, Elara broke the seal. "Miss Voss. I find myself in need of clarification regarding last evening's incident. You will attend me in my library at Winterfell House this afternoon at 3 o'clock. A carriage will collect you at 2:30. Winterfell. No polite inquiry. No request. A command." Beatrice clutched her arm. "He is summoning you. To his house. Alone." "Hardly alone," Lady Harrington snapped, though her eyes gleamed with calculation. "A duke's notice, even if scandalous, could elevate the entire family if managed correctly. Elara will go, of course. With a suitable chaperone. I shall accompany her myself." Elara wanted to protest, but the words lodged in her throat. Refusal was impossible. Dukes did not invite, they decreed. And refusal would cost her this position, the only barrier between her family and destitution. At precisely 2:30, a sleek black town coach emblazoned with the same wolf crest drew up outside. The Harrington ladies descended the steps. Lady Harrington in pompous plum silk, Beatrice vibrating with excitement, Elara in her plainest grey walking dress, half veil drawn to shield her face. Winterfell House loomed at the end of Park Lane like a fortress transplanted from the moors, severe grey stone, narrow windows, gargoyles glaring from the eaves. No welcoming flowers softened the entrance, only evergreens clipped into rigid submission. A butler as austere as his master admitted them to a hall that smelled faintly of leather, beeswax, and cold air. Portraits of stern Hale ancestors stared down in judgment. "His Grace will receive Miss Voss alone," the butler intoned. "Lady Harrington and Lady Beatrice will await in the gold drawing room." Lady Harrington bristled. "That is highly improper. His Grace's instructions were explicit, my lady." Elara laid a calming hand on her employer's arm. "I shall be quite safe, my lady. It is only clarification he seeks." Though her stomach twisted at the lie. She was led down a corridor lined with ancient tapestries, battles, wolves, winter storms, until the butler opened a heavy oak door. The library was vast, 2 stories of books climbing into shadow. A fire crackled in a hearth large enough to roast an ox, yet the room remained chill. At its center, behind a desk of dark walnut, stood the Duke. He had discarded his evening finery for severe black superfine, the white of his cravat a stark slash against tanned skin. No waistcoat embroidery, no fobs or seals, only power distilled into cloth and bone. He did not rise. Did not smile. "Miss Voss." His voice rolled across the turkey carpet like approaching thunder. "Close the door." She obeyed, every instinct screaming retreat. The click of the latch sounded final. He studied her for a long moment, as though weighing her worth against some invisible scale. "You are not a debutante," he said at last. It was not a question. "No, Your Grace. I am companion to Lady Beatrice Harrington. Yet you move through ballrooms with the caution of a spy." Her breath caught. "I merely seek to avoid notice. An ambition in which you failed spectacularly last night." One corner of his mouth twitched, amusement or disdain, she could not tell. "Explain how a paid companion comes to collide with me rather than any of the dozen lesser obstacles in her path." Heat flooded her cheeks. Lady Thorne stepped backward without looking. "I was attempting to reach my cousin before she compromised herself with Captain Lyle." He finished the sentence smoothly. "Yes. I observed." She lifted her chin, defiance sparking despite fear. "Then you know it was accident, Your Grace. No design." "Perhaps." He rose then, all 6 feet and more of him unfolding with predatory grace. He rounded the desk, stopping an arm's length away. Close enough that she caught the scent of him, pine, leather, and something sharply cold, like mountain air. "Yet accidents have consequences. Half the ton now believes I have singled you out. Lady Thorne is spreading tales that you threw yourself at me." Ilara's hands clenched at her sides. "I did no such thing. I am aware." His gaze flicked over her face, lingering on her mouth a fraction too long. "Which presents me with a problem. My reputation for indifference has served me well. I do not intend to lose it over a clumsy companion." The insult stung, but she held his stare. "Then deny the rumors, Your Grace. Say I am nothing to you. Denials fuel speculation." He tilted his head. "There is, however, a simpler solution." Her heart stumbled. "What solution?" "Marry me." The word struck like a pistol shot. For a moment the library spun, books and firelight blurring. "I beg your pardon. You heard me correctly." His tone remained conversational, as though proposing over tea. "A quiet ceremony. You become Duchess of Winterfell. The gossip dies instantly, no one dares question my choice once made. You gain security for yourself and, I presume, your family. I regain my peace." Ilara laughed, a short, incredulous sound she could not suppress. "You cannot be serious." "I am never less than serious, Miss Voss." She took a step back, bumping into a leather-winged chair. "You know nothing of me. My father was accused of treason. My family is ruined. I bring no dowry, no connections. I am aware of your father's alleged crime." His voice softened a fraction. "I sat on the committee that reviewed the evidence. There was none. The charges were politically convenient." She stared, hope and terror warring within her. "Then why?" "Because I require a wife who wants nothing from me." He moved closer, towering. "No love, no children, no interference in my affairs. A marriage of convenience only. You, Miss Voss, have demonstrated discretion and intelligence. You need protection. I need silence. We suit." Her mind raced. Duchess. Security for her mother, medicine for her brother. Safety from the workhouse. but chained to this icy stranger who looked at her as though she were a transaction. And if I refuse? His eyes narrowed. Then I withdraw my notice entirely. The rumors will fester. Lady Thorne will see you dismissed. Your position lost, your family destitute. The choice is yours. He extended a document across the desk, marriage articles already drawn, spaces awaiting signatures. Ilara stared at the parchment as though it were a serpent. Outside, distant thunder rumbled over London, promising storm. She lifted the pen. The pen hovered above the parchment for what felt like an eternity. Ink trembled at the nib, a single black drop swelling, threatening to fall and seal her fate. Ilara's hand shook, not from cold, though the library's fire seemed to throw no warmth toward her, but from the enormity of the choice. Marry the Frost Lord. Become a duchess. Save her family. Or refuse, and watch them slide into ruin while she drowned in scandal. She looked up. The Duke watched her with that unnerving patience, arms folded across his chest, the firelight carving sharp shadows along the planes of his face. He did not press, did not coax. He simply waited, certain of the outcome. Because he knew she had no real choice. The drop of ink fell, blotting the page like a tear. Ilara set the pen down without signing. I require time, Your Grace, she said, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. 1 week. 2. Consider the articles and consult my mother. His brow arched, a fractional movement that somehow conveyed both surprise and displeasure. Time is a luxury gossip does not allow, Miss Voss. Yet you ask me to bind my life to yours without reflection. Surely a week is not unreasonable. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, rain began to lash the tall windows, drumming like impatient fingers. 3 days, he countered at last. My solicitor will amend the settlements to include an allowance for your mother and full medical care for your brother. You may visit them tomorrow if you wish, under my escort. Refuse me after that, and my offer withdraws permanently. It was generous, shockingly so. More than any penniless girl dared dream. And yet it felt like a gilded cage closing around her. She inclined her head. 3 days, Your Grace. He rang a small bell on the desk. The butler appeared with uncanny speed. Escort Miss Voss to her companions. And have my carriage convey the ladies home. Ilara curtsied, retreating with as much dignity as she could muster. The door closed behind her with the finality of a crypt. In the gold drawing room, Lady Harrington and Beatrice pounced like eager spaniels. Well? Beatrice demanded. What did he say? Ilara hesitated. The truth would ignite chaos. He wished to ensure no harm came to me in the collision. He apologized for any distress caused. Lady Harrington's eyes narrowed. That is all. That is all. The lie tasted bitter, but it bought her time. That night, in the Harrington attic, Ilara wrote 2 letters by candle stub. One to her mother, carefully vague. The second, hidden beneath her mattress, was to an old family solicitor who had once served her father. She needed truth, about the treason charges, about the Duke's claim of insufficient evidence. If she was to sell her future, she would do so with eyes open. The next morning brought a summons of a different sort. A footman delivered a note in Lady Harrington's breakfast room. Miss Voss is requested to accompany His Grace the Duke of Winterfell on a drive in the park at 11 o'clock. The Duchess's landau will call for her. Beatrice squealed loud enough to rattle the teacups. Lady Harrington looked as though she might faint from ambition. Whatever you said to him yesterday worked, girl, she hissed as footmen laced Ilara into her best walking dress, still woefully plain beside the Duke's consequence. Do not squander this chance. The landau was open despite the chill December air, drawn by matched greys. The Duke awaited inside, greatcoat collar turned up, a fur-lined rug across his knees. He handed her up himself, his gloved fingers brushing hers. As the carriage rolled toward Hyde Park, London gawked. Curtains twitched in Mayfair windows, riders reined in to stare. The Frost Lord, who never drove women in public, paraded a nobody through the ton's most visible stage. "You do this to quell gossip?" Elara asked quietly once they reached the quieter paths near the Serpentine. "I do this," he replied, "to make refusal impossible." She turned to him, anger flaring. "You manipulate circumstances to force my hand." "I manipulate circumstances," he corrected, "to protect what is soon to be mine. Once we are betrothed, speculation ends. Your reputation, and your family's, will be under my shield. And if I still refuse?" His gaze flicked to her mouth, then away. "You will not." Arrogant, infuriating man. Yet when they passed a cluster of dowagers whose fans snapped like gunfire, he shifted subtly, angling his body to block their stares from her. A small protection, but deliberate. They spoke little. He asked measured questions, her brother's symptoms, her mother's health, the exact sum needed monthly. He listened without sentiment, committing details to memory as though tallying an estate ledger. Near the park's exit, a rider approached, Captain Lyle, Beatrice's reckless flirtation, his uniform bright against the bare trees. "Your Grace." He doffed his hat, eyes sliding curiously to Elara. "Miss Voss, is it? We met briefly at Eldridge House." The Duke's voice could have frozen the Serpentine. "You are mistaken, Captain. This is my betrothed." The word dropped like a gauntlet. Captain Lyle paled, stammered congratulations, and fled. Elara's heart hammered. "You had no right." "I had every right," the Duke said calmly. "The bans will be read Sunday if you sign tomorrow. Delay serves neither of us." She wanted to rage, to strike that impassive face. Instead, tears pricked, furious, helpless tears she refused to let fall. The carriage returned her to Grosvenor Square. As she descended, he spoke once more, voice low. "Tomorrow, Miss Voss. My solicitor will call at 10. Bring whatever conditions you require. I will meet them." That evening, the second letter arrived, smuggled by a sympathetic Harrington maid who had once served Elara's family. The old solicitor confirmed the Duke's claim, no real evidence against her father, only whispers and political expediency. The Hale family, he added in a shaking hand, had quietly opposed the attainder in Parliament. The Duke himself had spoken against it. Why? Elara sat by her cold attic window long into the night, watching rain streak the glass. Security. Power. Safety for those she loved. At the cost of her freedom, her heart, perhaps her very self. But what was her heart worth against her brother's life? Against her mother's dignity? At dawn, she took out the marriage articles the Duke's solicitor had left. With steady fingers now, she added 3 clauses in her neat, educated hand. Her mother and brother to reside in a suitable house on one of the Duke's unentailed estates, with staff and physicians at his expense, she to retain control of her personal allowance and any future inheritance, the marriage to remain unconsummated unless both parties willingly agree otherwise. She sanded the ink, folded the pages, and sealed them. When the solicitor arrived the next morning, she handed him the amended document without a word. By evening, a reply came, her conditions accepted without alteration. The bans would be read Sunday. Elara stood at her attic window again, watching snow begin to fall over London's rooftops, soft, silent, inexorable. Like the Duke's will. Like her surrender. The bans were read on Sunday. Elara stood in the shadowed back pew of St. George's, Hanover Square, her gloved hands folded so tightly in her lap that her fingers ached. The church smelled of cold stone and extinguished candles, the air heavy with murmured anticipation. She did not look up when the vicar spoke her name, Elara Voss, nor when he paired it with the Duke's, binding them together with words older than either of them. Across the nave, she felt him more than she saw him. The Duke of Winterfell stood with unyielding stillness near the altar, tall and severe in black, his presence a pressure against the air itself. He did not glance back. He had no need to. The Tun already knew. By tomorrow, all of London would. When the service ended, whispers rose like a tide. 3 times, a dowager hissed behind a fan. He's never been read once before. Who is she? Another murmured. No family, no fortune. Exactly, came the answer. That is why. Elara exited quickly, head bowed, escorted by a footman who might as well have been a jailer. Outside, the cold struck her face like a reprimand. Snow dusted the church steps, untouched and pristine. She wondered idly how long it would take before it was trampled into slush. The Duke's carriage waited. He did not offer his hand this time, only inclined his head and gestured her inside. The door shut with a solid finality that echoed unpleasantly in her chest. For several moments, neither spoke. The carriage rolled through London streets, past staring crowds and curtained windows. Elara watched her reflection tremble in the glass, pale and composed, a woman already disappearing beneath a title she had not yet earned. "You may speak," he said at last. She almost laughed. "How generous of you." His jaw tightened. "Do not provoke me for sport, Miss Voss. You have achieved your terms." "Have I?" She turned to face him. "My family is secure, yes. But I am paraded like proof of conquest. I was not asked whether I wished the banns read today. You knew they would be. You declared me your betrothed without consent. You engineered my ruin, then offered marriage as absolution. I prevented your ruin," he corrected coolly. "And I offered certainty. On your terms." The carriage slowed as they neared Winterfell House. He studied her with that unsettling calm, as though measuring damage rather than emotion. "You mistake clarity for cruelty," he said. "I do not deceive. I do not dither. You required safety. I provided it. Sentiment would have endangered both." Her throat tightened despite herself. "You speak as though feelings are a contagion." "They are," he replied without hesitation. "And they weaken judgment." The carriage halted. Inside Winterfell House, the atmosphere had subtly changed. Servants moved with sharper purpose, eyes flicking to Elara with a mix of curiosity and caution. She was no longer merely a guest, or a nuisance. She was becoming something. The Duke led her not to the library, nor to the public drawing rooms, but deeper into the house, along corridors she had not seen before. "My mother's former apartments," he said when she faltered. "They are unused." Former. The word carried weight. The rooms were spare but elegant, tall windows overlooking the frost-whitened gardens, furniture of dark wood polished to a muted gleam. No frivolous ornamentation, no excess. A life curated with restraint. "These will be yours," he said. "If you wish alterations, instruct the housekeeper." Elara turned slowly, taking it in. "You offer me space as though it were a kindness." "It is autonomy," he replied. "Within reason." She met his gaze. "And outside these walls? Your movements will be discreet but unrestricted. Appearances will be required. Scandal will not. A cage with velvet bars." A maid entered quietly with tea, eyes fixed firmly on the carpet. Elara accepted a cup she did not want, more for the excuse to steady her hands than for comfort. "I will visit my family tomorrow," Elara said. "Alone?" He considered. "No." Anger flared, sudden and sharp. "That was not a request." And this is not a negotiation. His voice softened marginally. Your mother's safety is not in question, but until the wedding, proximity invites risk. I will accompany you. She slammed her cup onto the table, tea sloshing dangerously close to the rim. You promised restraint. I promised protection. Silence stretched between them, brittle as ice. At last, he spoke again, quieter now. You do not trust me. No, she said honestly. I do not. Something flickered across his face, too swift to name. Good, he said. Trust breeds expectation. That night, Elara lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the house breathe around her. Winterfell House was never truly silent, it groaned softly, as though remembering older winters, harsher occupants. She rose before dawn and went to the window. In the garden below, the Duke stood alone. He was coatless despite the cold, dark hair dusted with snow, head tilted back as though inviting the frost to claim him. For a moment, he looked less like a man and more like a monument, unyielding, solitary, carved from winter itself. She watched him until he moved, disappearing into the trees. The visit to her family took place that afternoon. The house he had provided was modest but warm, well-staffed, with a physician already in residence. Her mother wept openly when she saw Elara, clutching her hands as though afraid she might vanish. Her brother looked stronger, color returning faintly to his cheeks. You did this, her mother whispered, awe and guilt tangling in her voice. You saved us. Elara smiled, nodded, said nothing. The Duke remained outside, speaking quietly with the physician, giving instructions without intrusion. For the first time, she saw him not as an oppressor, but as a force, one that reshaped lives without asking permission. On the return journey, she spoke softly. Why did you truly oppose my father's attainder? He did not look at her. Because it was wrong. That is not reason enough for men like you. A pause. Then, my mother was accused once. Not of treason, but of influence. She died of it. Elara's breath caught. I'm sorry. So am I, he said simply. Which is why I will not allow your family to be devoured by rumor. The admission unsettled her more than cruelty would have. When they reached Winterfell House, he did not escort her inside. Rest, he said. Tomorrow, the dressmaker arrives. She watched him walk away, wondering, against her will, what kind of man built walls so thick even grief could not escape. And whether, one day, she would be buried inside them. The dressmaker arrived with the morning. Elara heard the commotion before she saw it, voices in the corridor, the rustle of fabric, the clipped authority of the Duke's housekeeper directing servants like pieces on a chessboard. By the time a maid knocked and entered her sitting room, Winterfell House had already decided what she would become. His Grace has arranged everything, my lady, the maid said, eyes bright with a mixture of awe and nerves. My lady. The word sat uneasily on Elara's shoulders. Madame Ardent is the finest modiste in London. She has brought sketches for the wedding attire and your new wardrobe. Elara set down her untouched breakfast. I did not request a new wardrobe. The maid smiled faintly. His Grace anticipated you would not. Moments later, Madame Ardent swept in, a commanding woman in her 50s, silver hair pinned severely, measuring tape looped like a weapon around her neck. Behind her trailed two assistants bearing garment bags heavy with promise and expectation. Elara rose slowly. Good morning. Madame Ardent's gaze traveled over her with professional appraisal, missing nothing. Ah. Yes. He has chosen well. Elara stiffened. Chosen. The woman waved a hand, already reaching for pins. Do not trouble yourself with modesty, child. Beauty is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. His Grace understands that. That unsettled her more than flattery. The first gown was lifted free, ivory silk, understated but exquisite, the fabric catching the light like snow just beginning to melt. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. It felt like surrender before the battle had even begun. As the maids laced her in, Elara studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked composed, elegant, untouchable. A duchess in waiting. She did not recognize herself. The door opened without announcement. The Duke entered. Madame Ardent froze for half a breath, then inclined her head. "Your Grace." Elara's pulse leapt. "You might have knocked." "This is my house," he replied evenly, though his eyes were already on her. She turned despite herself, anger and something far more dangerous tightening her chest. His gaze swept over her, not lingering, not crude, but devastating in its focus. He saw the way the gown sharpened her spine, the quiet strength in her posture. He saw her fit into the world he was building. Something unreadable passed through his expression. "It will suffice," he said. Suffice. The word stung. Madame Ardent bustled forward. "We can adjust the neckline if your Grace desires something more." "No," he cut in. "This is correct." Elara lifted her chin. "I am not an estate improvement, your Grace." A beat of silence. The modiste and maid suddenly found reasons to retreat, murmuring excuses until the room was empty but for the two of them. The door closed. Elara turned fully toward him. "You parade me before London, clothe me to your specifications, and yet you speak of me as though I were interchangeable." His jaw tightened. "You mistake control for indifference." "Do I?" She took a step closer, emboldened by the rare crack in his composure. "Tell me, then, what do you feel when you look at me?" The question hung between them, dangerous and raw. His gaze dropped, not to her bodice, but to her hands, clenched at her sides. "Enough," he said quietly. "Which is precisely the problem." Her breath caught. "Enough for what?" "For distraction." She laughed softly, brittle. "You need not fear that. I will not trouble you with affection. I am not speaking of yours." The admission landed like a blow. For the first time, she saw it, tension held under iron discipline, desire smothered beneath duty and memory. The Frost Lord indeed. A man who locked even himself out. "You should leave," she said, suddenly unsure of her footing. He did not move. "You will learn quickly, Elara, that I do not act without cause. This marriage is necessity, but necessity does not preclude consequence." "And what consequence do you fear?" she asked. His eyes lifted to hers, glacial and intent. "That I may want what I have no right to claim." The word sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. A sharp knock shattered the moment. A footman entered, pale. "Your Grace." "There is a visitor." The Duke's expression hardened instantly. "Who?" "Lady Thorne." Elara's stomach dropped. "Of course." Lady Thorne swept into the drawing room with practiced grace, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Winterfell," she purred. "How domestic of you." Her gaze slid to Elara, taking in the gown, the posture, the unmistakable shift in status. Something dark flashed in her eyes. "So," Lady Thorne continued sweetly, "the rumors were true." "They were inevitable," the Duke replied. "As is your departure." She laughed lightly. "Oh, I would never intrude. I merely wish to congratulate your bride." Elara inclined her head. "My lady." Lady Thorne's smile widened. "Tell me, Miss Voss, do you enjoy playing Duchess?" The insult was deliberate. Elara opened her mouth, but the Duke spoke first. "Mind your tongue," he said coldly. "You stand in my house." Lady Thorne's eyes flickered. "Ah. So protective already." "Be warned," he continued, voice low and lethal. "Any attempt to undermine her will be treated as an attack on me." Silence fell, thick and charged. Lady Thorne recovered with a graceful shrug. How very serious you are. I shall, of course, behave. But as she swept past Elara, she leaned close enough to whisper, "Winter melts, dear. And when it does, it floods." She was gone before Elara could respond. That night, Elara stood again at the window, watching snow drift down into darkness. London felt very far away. So did the girl she had once been. The Duke joined her silently. "She will not harm you," he said. "I believe she will try." He nodded once. "Then she will fail." Elara turned to him. "This world of yours, it devours the unprepared." "Yes," he agreed. "Which is why I will teach you how to survive it." She searched his face. "Why?" "For the same reason I do everything," he said. "Because once you are mine, I do not allow what is mine to be destroyed." Possessive. Chilling. And yet, standing beside him in the falling snow, Elara felt something else stir, something perilous and alive. Not surrender. Resolve. If she was to be forged into a duchess, she would not emerge brittle. She would emerge steel. The first lesson began without warning. Elara learned this when she was summoned, not by note, not by footman, but by the sudden presence of the Duke himself in her sitting room just after dawn. He stood near the hearth, coat already on, gloves in hand, as though the house had merely grown him overnight. "You will accompany me today," he said. She set aside the book she had been pretending to read. "To where?" "The world you are marrying into." That was all the explanation she received. Within the hour, she found herself seated beside him in a closed carriage, London unspooling beyond the windows in shades of grey and white. The city looked different from this vantage, less familiar, more watchful. Elara sensed she was being measured, not by him, but by the streets themselves. They stopped not at a grand townhouse or fashionable promenade, but before a row of narrow brick buildings near the river. The air smelled of damp stone and industry. No banners announced his presence. No crowds gathered. "This is not Mayfair," she said carefully. "No," he replied. "This is where consequences live." Inside, the building was warm and crowded. Clerks bent over ledgers, messengers hurried past, and men in sober coats argued in low, intense tones. Every head lifted when the Duke entered. Conversation ceased. Authority radiated from him without effort. Elara stayed close, pulse quickening. "This is one of my trade houses," he said quietly as they walked. "Loans, shipping interests, insurance. Power rarely resides where people think it does." They entered a private office. A man rose hastily from behind the desk, face drawn. "Your Grace." "I." "Sit," the Duke commanded. "Explain." The man swallowed. "There has been a disruption. One of our partners defaulted. It has caused strain." "How much?" the Duke asked. The number named was staggering. Elara stiffened. Even she understood its weight. The Duke's expression did not change. "Who knew?" The man hesitated. "Who?" the Duke repeated softly, "benefited." The truth spilled out in fragments: betrayal, quiet alliances, Lady Thorne's name surfacing like a stain in clear water. Elara felt the room tilt. When they left, the Duke's jaw was set like stone. "She is testing you," Elara said, breaking the silence. "She is testing me," he replied. "And using you as leverage." Her chest tightened. "I will not be a weapon." "You already are," he said without cruelty. "The question is whether you will be sharpened or shattered." The carriage carried them next to the East End. Elara stared as children ran barefoot through slush, as women huddled in doorways, shawls pulled tight against hunger and cold. The Duke disembarked without hesitation, ignoring the stares that followed. "This is also mine," he said. "Not in ownership, but in responsibility." He spoke with local leaders, promised cold deliveries, funded a clinic without fanfare. No grand gestures. Just quiet control. You could end half of this suffering, Elara said when they left. Yes, he replied. And replace it with dependency. Charity that soothes conscience but solves nothing is indulgence. She did not fully agree, but she understood. By afternoon, exhaustion weighed on her bones. When they finally returned to Winterfell House, snow had begun to fall again, thick and unrelenting. That evening, Elara received her first formal invitation as the Duke's betrothed. A dinner. Small. Influential. She dressed alone this time, choosing a gown of deep blue instead of ivory. Not surrender. Statement. At the table, conversation cut like knives disguised as compliments. Eyes lingered. Judgments formed. You are very composed, one lady remarked. Considering how quickly fortune smiled upon you. Elara smiled back. Fortune rarely smiles without expectation. The Duke's hand closed over hers beneath the table, not to comfort, but to anchor. Later, as guests departed, Elara confronted him in the library. You brought me into battle today, she said. Without armor. You needed to see the cost, he replied. And to be seen. Seen as what? As someone worth destroying. The truth chilled her more than winter air. That night, sleep eluded her again. Near midnight, a sound in the corridor drew her from bed. She opened her door to find the Duke standing there, his face drawn, eyes dark. There is something you must know, he said. Her heart lurched. What? The threats against your family were never hypothetical. Her breath left her in a rush. What do you mean? I intercepted a letter tonight, he said quietly. An offer. To withdraw opposition to your father's name, in exchange for you withdrawing from this engagement. Elara's hands trembled. From whom? He hesitated. My uncle. The admission struck like ice water. He wants you unprotected, the Duke continued. Isolated. And if you refuse? Then my family pays, she finished hoarsely. Yes. Silence swallowed them. At last, Elara spoke, her voice steadier than she felt. Then teach me faster. Something fierce lit in his eyes. I will, he said. But understand this, winter does not forgive weakness. She met his gaze, unflinching. Neither do I. And for the first time since this bargain began, the Duke smiled, not coldly, not with control, but with something dangerously close to pride. The letter burned in Elara's thoughts long after the Duke had left her door. She did not sleep. Instead, she sat at her writing desk, candle guttering low, staring at the pale wall as though answers might bleed from it. His uncle. The Duke's blood. The danger had not come from the margins of society, nor from spurned ladies nursing wounded pride, it had come from the heart of Winterfell itself. By dawn, resolve had replaced fear. If she was to survive this marriage, she could not remain a passenger. The opportunity came sooner than expected. At breakfast, the Duke read from a folded note, his expression darkening incrementally. My uncle will arrive tonight, he said. He has requested a private dinner. Elara lifted her teacup with deliberate calm. And you intend to grant it? I do, he replied. Refusal would confirm his suspicions. Then he will come hunting, she said quietly. For weakness. The Duke studied her over the rim of his cup. Yes. Good, Elara said. Let him find none. The carriage that evening was an exercise in restraint. The Duke sat opposite her, long legs braced against the sway, gaze distant and inward. Elara watched him, noting the tension he barely concealed. For the first time, she wondered what it had cost him to become this man, what softness had been sacrificed to survive his own family. Lord Calder Hale arrived precisely on time. He was older than the Duke by 2 decades, but cut from the same severe cloth, tall, lean, eyes sharp with calculation. Where the Duke's cold was glacial, Calder's was surgical. "My dear nephew," Calder said smoothly, embracing him. "And this must be the future Duchess." Elara inclined her head. "My lord." Calder's gaze lingered, assessing. "How fortunate you are," he murmured. "To be chosen." Elara smiled faintly. "Fortune is rarely accidental." Dinner was served in the smaller state dining room, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tests. Calder spoke of politics, of trade, of subtle shifts in Parliament. Each topic was a probe. "You move quickly," Calder observed, slicing his meat with precision. "Marriage so soon after scandal?" "Decisiveness discourages speculation," the Duke replied. "Or invites it," Calder countered, eyes sliding to Elara. "Especially when one marries, beneath one's station." Elara set down her fork. "It is beneath no one's station to act with integrity, my lord." A flicker of surprise crossed Calder's face. Interest followed. "Well said," he conceded. "Tell me, Miss Voss, what do you think of power?" The question was baited. Elara did not rush. "Power reveals more than it creates," she said. "It strips away excuses." Calder smiled thinly. "You are not what I expected." "Few people are," she replied. The Duke watched the exchange with quiet intensity. Later, in the withdrawing room, Calder requested Elara's company while the Duke reviewed documents with a steward. The separation was deliberate. Calder poured them brandy. "You understand why I object to this marriage." "I understand you fear losing influence," Elara said evenly. He laughed softly. "Honest. Refreshing. Yes, my nephew has always been inconveniently principled. You will temper that." "I have no intention of tampering with him." "No," Calder agreed. "You will tame him instead." She met his gaze without flinching. "He is not an animal." "No," Calder said. "He is worse. He believes himself just." Calder stepped closer. "You could have freedom, Miss Voss. Wealth. Protection. Away from this house. Away from winter." "My family?" she asked. "Safe," he said smoothly. "Provided you vanish." The offer was tempting in its simplicity. Elara smiled. "You misunderstand me, my lord. I am not here to be spared." His expression hardened. "You are making a mistake." "Perhaps," she said. "But it will be mine." The Duke returned before Calder could respond. His gaze moved between them, sharp. "You threaten my household," the Duke said quietly. "Leave." Calder inclined his head, all civility restored. "Of course. But remember, blood remembers blood." When he was gone, silence descended. "You should not have faced him alone," the Duke said. "I needed to," Elara replied. "Now we both know what he wants." He studied her, something fierce and unguarded in his eyes. "He will escalate. So will I." That night, the storm broke. Wind howled through the eaves, rattling windows, snow lashing the glass like thrown gravel. Elara woke to the sound of breaking crystal. She threw on a robe and rushed into the corridor. Smoke. Her heart seized. Servants shouted below. Firelight flickered where it should not. Elara ran. She reached the west wing just as a beam collapsed, sparks flying. The Duke emerged from the smoke, coat thrown over his shoulders, directing men with sharp, precise commands. "Your Grace," she cried. He turned, relief flashing across his face before fury replaced it. "You should not be here." "Neither should fire," she shot back. They stood amid chaos, eyes locked. This was no accident. This was war. And winter had finally been challenged. The west wing burned like a wound torn open. Flames clawed at the ancient timbers, devouring draperies that had survived centuries of winter. Smoke rolled along the ceilings in choking waves, stinging Ilara's eyes and coating her tongue with ash. Servants moved in frantic lines, hauling water, shouting orders that vanished beneath the roar of the fire. Ilara did not retreat. She grabbed a bucket from a trembling maid and joined the line, skirts hitched without thought for decorum. Somewhere behind her, the Duke barked commands, his voice cutting through chaos with lethal clarity. Get the children out first. Seal the east corridor. No one goes back alone. A beam cracked overhead. Ilara, he shouted. She looked up just in time to see a section of ceiling give way. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, hauling her back as burning wood slammed where she had stood moments before. The heat seared her cheek, his arm locked around her waist, iron strong. I told you to leave, he growled. I will not, she snapped, breathless. Not while this is my house too. The word surprised them both. For a heartbeat, he stared at her as though seeing her anew. Then he nodded once. Then stay where I can see you. They worked side by side until the fire was contained, the damage brutal but not fatal. Dawn found the west wing blackened, smoldering, the air thick with loss and exhaustion. Arson. There was no doubt now. In the gray morning light, Ilara sat wrapped in a blanket, hands shaking as the last embers died. The Duke crouched before her, inspecting the burn on her cheek. You were nearly killed, he said quietly. So were you. His jaw tightened. This was meant as a warning. From your uncle. Yes. She held his gaze. He will not stop. No, he agreed. Neither will I. The intimacy of shared danger settled between them, heavy and unspoken. His gloved thumb brushed her skin, gentle despite the moment. She did not pull away. Later that morning, the magistrate arrived, followed by constables. Questions were asked. Answers were carefully given. Names were not spoken aloud, but everyone understood. By afternoon, the ton knew. By evening, Lady Thorne's carriage was seen leaving London under cover of darkness. Winterfell House was quieter that night, its scars exposed. Ilara wandered the damaged corridor, grief catching unexpectedly in her throat. She had lost little she could name, yet the sense of violation was profound. You are mourning bricks, the Duke said softly behind her. I am mourning safety, she replied. He stood beside her, close but not touching. Safety is an illusion. Control is the closest we come. She turned to him then. You cannot control everything. No, he admitted. Which is why I chose you. Her breath hitched. Because I am convenient. Because you endure. The word settled deep, heavy with meaning. That night, a storm returned, fierce and unrelenting. Ilara found herself unable to sleep, drawn instead to the library where the fire burned low. The Duke was there, coat discarded, sleeves rolled, shadows carving him into something less invincible. I will not leave, Ilara said without preamble. He looked up slowly. I did not ask you to. You could, she pressed. For my safety. For your safety, he echoed, standing. Or for my fear. She met him halfway across the room. Both. Silence stretched, taut and alive. I do not know how to protect you without losing you, he said at last. You do not own me, she replied gently. But I am here. By choice. Something broke then, not loudly, not completely, but enough. He reached for her and stopped himself, fist clenching at his side. This marriage, these walls, were meant to keep everything contained. And yet, she whispered, here we are. The distance between them vanished. His hand came to rest on her waist, tentative despite its strength. Her fingers curled into his sleeve. Their breath mingled, frost and fire colliding. This changes nothing, he murmured. It changes everything, she replied. He kissed her then, not with possession, but with restraint barely holding back need. It was brief, devastating, and over far too soon. He pulled away, breath uneven. We must not. I know, she said. But now we cannot pretend. Thunder rolled overhead. Outside, snow fell softly, covering ash and ruin alike. Winterfell House stood scarred but unbroken. So did they. And in the quiet aftermath of fire, Elara understood something with chilling clarity. Winter was no longer the greatest danger. Love was. Winterfell House woke beneath a false calm. Snow lay pristine over scorched stone, disguising damage but not erasing it. Elara stood at her window, watching servants move through the courtyard with measured efficiency. The house endured, as it always had, but endurance came at a cost. So did love. The Duke had not sought her out after the kiss. Not in the morning. Not at noon. Not even as evening crept in and shadows lengthened. By nightfall, Elara understood, restraint was his final defense. She found him in the map room, where war had been planned long before she ever crossed his threshold. Candles ringed the table, their light flickering across old borders and red-inked territories. You're avoiding me, she said. He did not look up. I am protecting you. From whom? She asked. Your uncle, or yourself. That made him turn. You do not know what you are stepping into, he said, voice low. Calder will strike again. Subtly this time. He will ruin you if he cannot remove you. He already tried, Elara replied. And failed. You think this ends with fire, he snapped. It ends with blood. Then stop standing alone in it, she said. You chose me because I endure. Let me prove it. Silence pressed in. He exhaled slowly. My uncle has allied with men in Parliament. They will move to declare me unfit to hold the title, claim I married recklessly to conceal instability. And me? They will paint you as a liability. A woman of influence who should never have had it. Elara stepped closer. Then let them look. He stared at her. You are not afraid. I am, she said. But fear is no longer enough to move me. A knock interrupted them. The steward entered, pale. Your Grace. Lord Calder has been taken into custody. The words hung, unreal. On what charge? The Duke asked. Conspiracy, the steward said. Attempted arson. There was a witness. A servant he tried to bribe. And evidence recovered from his London residence. Elara felt her knees weaken, not with relief, but with the sudden weight of what could have been lost. The Duke closed his eyes once. When he opened them, something had shifted. The following days unfolded swiftly. Calder's name was dragged through every drawing room and newspaper column. Allies vanished. Doors closed. The threat that had loomed like a blade finally withdrew. Winterfell House breathed again. On the morning of the wedding, the sky was clear. Elara stood before the mirror as maids adjusted lace and silk. She barely recognized herself, not because of the gown, but because of the stillness within her. She was no longer a woman hiding from circumstance. She was stepping into it. When she reached the great hall, the Duke waited at the altar, dressed in dark formal wear, his expression carved from restraint. But when he saw her, restraint fractured. Just enough. The vows were spoken quietly, intensely, promises forged in fire and winter alike. When he kissed her this time, there was no hesitation. No retreat. Applause echoed through the hall, but Elara heard only the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. That night, they stood together on the balcony, wrapped in fur and silence, looking out over the frozen grounds. I once believed love was a weakness, the Duke said. A fracture point. And now? Elara asked. Now I know it is a choice, he said. One I will defend. She leaned into him. We will defend it. Below them, Winterfell House stood whole again, not unchanged, but stronger for having survived. The snow continued to fall. But inside, at last, the cold had lifted. And winter, having done its worst, finally loosened its grip.